Hello and welcome to day 2. As this week we are exploring, is Christianity really true? And the place that we have to begin with is, does God really exist? And yesterday we talked about the two parts of the equation, the two important building blocks that we need to take in order to believe and prove that Christianity really is true. And the first step is the step of faith. We'll spend some more time later on this week talking about that. But the first step is that we can reason and logic. God has given us tools that we can prove that He is real, that Jesus really came, and that what He said is really true. But today we're talking about, is God really real? Does God truly exist? And there are 3 basic arguments to believing and proving that God really does exist. And we're going to move over to the drawing board to understand those more closely.
Hey, so today we again are talking about the question, is God really real? And really what we're trying to answer is there any evidence or proof for the existence of God? Can we prove that God is real? We can't touch or feel Him. Is there proof? Now, before we go on, imagine this. There's a huge desk in a fancy room. Out in the back of the room, a door opens, a man comes out, maybe beard, he has a hammer in his hand. He is what we would call a judge. And this judge has a super important job. He needs to decide if something's right or wrong, something guilty or innocent. Now picture this, you're being brought in, judge assumes you're guilty. And you say, sir, but I have the one key out of this mess, I have evidence. Proof that you didn't do it, other kind of evidence that you weren't involved, whatever it was, you have evidence. We are trying to answer the question, is God real? We're trying to collect our evidence. The first type of evidence is the evidence that we find all around us. It's the evidence of creation. In creation, we see water, for example. We see beautiful trees, and we see humans, all amazing creatures and things. Let's pause on the idea of humans. Humans are these interesting beings. They can have emotions. They build relationships with others. They can do crazy things like rollerblading. Humans are incredibly creative, just like the Creator. If we look around at these things, we learn that people are without an excuse. That David, looking around at creation, maybe even while he was watching his sheep, said the following in a song to God. He said, as he looked around over God's creation, the heavens declare the glory of God. When we look around, we can see who God is and what He is like by looking at the water, the trees, and humans, and the way that they interact and the way that they are. We read that verse in Psalm 91, verse 1. The first one is creation, the first proof, the first evidence, something that we can see. The second one is also important and helpful. The second proof or evidence that God is real is what we call moral argument. A moral argument is just a fancy way to say that in our heart, God has hardwired, He has coded us to know what is right and what is wrong. So the moment that we are born, from age 2 to age 92, right? We know what's right, we know what's wrong. We know caring is good and hurting is bad. We also know that smiling is good, it's joyful. Crying is bad. We know that life itself is good and death is bad. God has programmed us. Now, why is that? How come is that? That is God's way of reminding us that we are not our own. We don't set our right and wrong standards ourselves. No, we get that from our Creator. Paul writes this super pointedly when he is describing how unbelievers interact with God. He says, by nature, so the way they were born, by nature they do what the law asks. So they are already following God, even if they might not realize it. So God has programmed us to know what's right, to know what's wrong. Call that the moral law. The first one's creation. The second argument or evidence that God is real is the moral argument. The third one is a little bit more abstract. And there are many people writing about this topic now, but it is purpose. That God has given all of us, and actually everything in this world, a purpose. We are here for a reason. We are not here on accident. And we share that quality with everything else that was created. We don't have to wonder why something was there. No, we can know that something has reason and purpose. Water has purpose. It waters the ground, lets things grow. An apple has a purpose. It has seeds inside of it that allow it to grow. And so we can assume that we have purpose. And if we have purpose, that means that we were purposefully made, which means there was a creator. Again, Paul writes about this in Colossians 1 verse 16, when he says that all things are created not just by him, but also for him, speaking of Christ. So we have creation as evidence, the moral law as evidence, knowing right from wrong, and we have purpose argument. Let's jot this down one more time. Creation, we can observe that around us. We have the moral law. And then lastly, we have purpose. All evidences that God exists. Evidences we can see, evidences we can feel, and evidences that are built inside of our brain. There is evidence for God. And before we close, one last thing. God will one day, after we lead our life and our life on earth comes to an end, and we meet God, he will ask us a super important question. What did you do with God? There will be no one that will be wondering if God is real then. And the person that comes to God and says, I didn't know you were real, God will say they are without excuse. We read that in Romans 1, verse 20. There is no reason why someone can assume that God is not real because of those three evidences. And because God is real, then life after our life on earth is real as well, in a real place called heaven or hell. So the question that we have is God real? Is super important to our everyday life and to our life after death.